Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bear Down Ballers here on the Field of 68 Network. I'm Ryan Wohl, and today we are joined by a very special guest. He is a basketball insider and analyst for Stadium and The Messenger, and most importantly, he is an Arizona alum. He is Jeff Goodman. How are you doing today, Jeff?
I'm good. I'm good. All's well, and excited to talk to you about man. Every year, I feel like we set the bar low for this Arizona team, and they come out of the gate strong. I mean, this is the third straight year Tommy Lloyd's done it. With a group that you just don't expect is going to be that good. I certainly didn't, and they go into Cameron Indoor Stadium and beat Duke, and I was there for it, and it was damn impressive.
Yeah. As we know, you were in the building there last Friday, a week ago. Just give me your biggest takeaways coming out of that game from this Arizona team.
They guard. They guard. Like I didn't know if I'd ever say that about a Tommy Lloyd team. They're most impressive because they're big, strong, tough, physical, and they want to defend. And I think what Tommy's done is understand that like it's great to have a bunch of skilled dudes that can move the ball, that can score. But if you can't guard at a pretty good level, you're not going to have a chance to go deep in the tournament. You got to have a little bit of both. And I think that's what he's done here, right? Adding Caleb Love. Keyshawn Johnson's just a killer defensively, what he brings to the table. Kai Boswell was the best player on the floor against Duke. He was the best player on the floor, like by far. Where Tyrese Proctor, the guy who got all the attention going into the game, people putting down as a lottery pick, he was completely outplayed by his counterpart, Kai Boswell. And I asked Kai about it after the game, and he was like, yeah, it definitely hit me. I read about and I heard about Tyrese Proctor a ton. And yeah, definitely chip on his shoulder. And Pelle Larsson was friggin' phenomenal down the stretch, made every right play. And he's kind of the forgotten man in some ways. And, he hasn't materialized for what we wanted him to be, which is a 15-point a game scorer, Ryan. But what he has done, like he does everything well. Everything well. He makes all the right decisions. Krivas was awesome. I know you're going to get to some of this stuff, but he missed some bunnies, but like he kept them in the game because he played tough and rebounded and was physical and, fought down low. So I was super impressed by this team. I don't know if they're the number one team. I've got them at number one because I think they deserve it. Beating Duke at Duke, I think that warrants it. And that's what I think you need to go by this early in the season is by results instead of paper rankings, which is what they were in the preseason.
Yeah, you mentioned this team has a lot of, good scorers and kind of a well-rounded group. And, it's different than, like you mentioned, the last couple years, with Benedict Mathurin, Azuolas Tubelis, kind of no doubt guys that are going to get you 18 to 20 to 22 every night. And then this year, there's six guys averaging in double figures through the three games. Just what do you think that says about this group and kind of like you mentioned, how Tommy's trying to establish, a different culture here in Tucson.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's more balanced. But having said that, they got a lot of guys that can hurt you that could go for 20. When you think of like balance, six guys that can all be in double figures, you're like, all right, well, none of them are going to be good enough to explode. That's not the case. Like Ballo can go for 20 if you feed him the ball. We know Caleb Love can go for 20. I think Pelle Larsson on the right night can go for 20. He's just not selfish, not assertive. I think Kai can go for 20. They just have a lot here. They've got a lot of good players. And again, they're athletic. They look like men. They're not super long at the guard spot. Certainly with Boswell and Caleb Love, they're not long, but they're tough. They're stocky. They're not going to be pushed around. And again, I think Kai Boswell gives them that shit, that toughness, like that they need. He doesn't necessarily look the part. Their guards kind of look like more like middle linebackers in a way, but man, they play. And even Caleb. Like, listen, I've been so critical of Caleb,
Mm-hmm.
and I talked to him after the game, and I said to him, I said, listen, I've probably been too critical, but my expectations for you were a lot higher than you played last year. You didn't guard last year. wasn't even about the poor shot selection at times. It was more about the defense and not taking pride in his defense in Carolina as well. So I think it was a bar that I think he had set the previous Final Four in a few of those games. And like, all right, where did he go? Where did this team go? And I think more of it fell on Caleb Love than it needed to. But he guarded, man. He got after it. He guarded. And he's still trying to figure out, and I talked to him about that. He's still trying to figure out like how to play with this group, right? Like at Carolina, he kind of had to be that dude because they didn't have a lot of guys that could do things off the bounce. At Arizona, they're not quite as reliant on him. So he was trying to pass the ball a lot more in that game against Duke, which isn't necessarily his thing, but I almost feel like, he's trying to show people I'm not selfish. I can be a good team guy and get people involved. And he's got to figure out that balance.
Yeah, that was the thing that stuck out to me the most in that Duke game is, it was one of those traditional Caleb Love games where shooting a low percentage, 3 for 10, I believe, from the field, only 11 points, but, the rebounds, like you mentioned, the assists, making the clutch free throws down the stretch, and his energy level, like you mentioned, on defense stood out and surprised me a lot. Have you been surprised by his effort level on defense and kind of just
Yeah.
like you mentioned, him fitting in and accepting that he's not the guy that's getting 20 shots a night, expecting to score 20 plus points. He kind of needs to affect the game in different ways every night.
Yeah, I'm sure he heard the criticism, not just from me, but this past off season. And I think the other thing is Tommy Lloyd's probably challenged him a little bit differently than Hubert Davis. Hubert is like the nicest human being in the world. He doesn't curse at all. I remember seeing him last year at PK 80, 85 in Portland, and they were awful, Carolina. And after each game, he was still kind of smiling and upbeat. And like, I just feel like Tommy's different, right? Tommy's going to get into him. He's going to challenge him in a practice when he's not guarding and probably curse a few times knowing Tommy. So I think it's a different setting, which is what I think Caleb Love needed at this point. And there's just not as much on him. So the expectations aren't what they were at Carolina, which was like every night he had to be efficient and scored 18 or 20. But again, for me, the biggest thing last year was his defense.
Yeah, another thing, just watching this team through the first couple games, it's just clear how different of a team. And to me, it's just so much more fun to watch this group than last year. And a big part of that is, Kirk Kreese was running the show, the past year plus. He turned it over a lot. His shooting was up and down. How big of a difference do you think that is going from that to just going, like you mentioned, Boswell? He's such a rock. He's so steady, and he's just a pro out there.
Listen, Kerr was erratic. That's what Kerr was. He could have some great games and he could have some absolute stinkers. And that's not what you need out of your point guard. Ask any coach and what do they want out of their point guard? Somebody that they know what they're going to get. And I think that's what Boswell, he's almost the opposite of Kerr in so many ways. He's not going to be super flashy, but he's going to get the job done. And you know what you're going to get out of him in every way. You could tell already they're looking at him as a leader already because of how hard he plays. I mean, some of the effort plays he had in that Duke game were ridiculous, and they set the tone for the team. Again, I like Kerr, but I think it had just run its course with Kerr Kreese, period. And I think he saw the writing on the wall with Kai Boswell behind him. And I think, everybody's in a better situation now that Kerr, other than Kerr sitting out 9 games at West Virginia. But I think Arizona's in a better spot because of Kerr's departure, to be honest.
Yeah, you mentioned Keyshawn Johnson earlier. I wanted to ask you more about him and just how big of an impact he makes and he's making for this team. He's leading this team in scoring. What do you think about that? He's leading the team in scoring with only 15 a game, but he's another just I think he's just a solid glue guy along with, Pelle Larsson. It seems like every game you can count on those two guys to do what they do.
Yeah, and again, listen, there's only one game that I really put any value in that they played so far. Let's be honest. Southern and Morgan State, they were absolute routes. They won each one by 35 plus points. So really, the only one that you're looking at and saying, all right, it meant something and we can evaluate from it was the Duke game. And Keyshawn was really good when it mattered on both ends. That 3-point play was huge. He rebounds, he defends, he's tough. He doesn't need the ball. He can kind of go get it. You don't have to really run plays for Keyshawn. And obviously he's got the experience that none of these other guys have right now of going to a Final Four. So, he fits. Like, Ballo's not going to be what Ballo was at the beginning of last year. I think that's unfair to put on him. I think Umar Ballo's just got to be a guy who finishes around the rim, which he missed some bunnies early in the Duke game, but I think he'll make those. Shoot a good percentage in there, rebound, block shots, run the floor, finish, do all those things. Because honestly, you're not going to get that many double teams with everything they have in the court.
Mm-hmm. Two other young guards that just, made a big impact in that Duke game. KJ Lewis, freshman, and then Jaden Bradley, transfer from Alabama. KJ Lewis, he only played 14 minutes, hasn't played a lot each game, but when he's on the floor, kind of reminds me a little bit of Kylan Boswell last year. Whenever he's on the floor, he's just making a huge impact, diving for loose balls, and he's also a better ball handler than I thought he was previously.
Yeah, I remember when I saw him last summer, he was just okay, and people were like, I think he was a top 50 player at that point. He didn't play great, so I didn't know what to expect. But man, he played hard. They've been raving about him, the staff, the whole preseason, raving about him. So I was excited to see him. But again, another guy you look at and you're like, all right, he doesn't look like a freshman. I mean, they're like polar opposite from what they've been the last couple of years. Again, they're so athletic, and honestly, even in like pre-games, you look at them and you're like, okay, like these dudes look the part. Where over the last couple of years, it was like, all right, limited athletically, again, could really score the ball. It was kind of like a carbon copy to some degree of Gonzaga, other than, again, what Tommy inherited, right? He inherited a few dudes that were maybe a little bit. Koloko was a difference maker defensively a couple of years ago, but he inherited Koloko. Now I think he's starting to see, again, you've got to have a mix and match here. You can have some international dudes that can score but can't really guard. That's fine, but you better have some other dudes that can really put it on the deck, can get up into you, and are big, strong, athletic dudes.
Yeah, how well, like I talked about a little bit ago, is that this group is a lot, like you just mentioned, more athletic. They're versatile. You could play with them in a lot of different ways. Just kind of projecting towards the tournament a couple months down the line. How well do you think this group can fare? Because as we saw in the last 2 years, when you rely on, they're not the only team that relied on a big man, to get them their buckets late in games. But when you rely on that, it's kind of tough when the game slows down. But now they have 4 to 5 legit guards that they could play small with Johnson. How do you think this team, because you rank them one right now, but how do you think, or where do you rank them of teams that can actually cut down nets in April?
Yeah, they're probably one of a dozen teams that probably can do it. I still worry about their perimeter shooting, to be honest. I still want to see it consistently. Caleb, the hard part of Caleb is you don't know what you're going to get out of him, and Keyshawn's not really a shooter. Teams are going to back off him and dare him to shoot. So I think, Kai Boswell, can he be a 36, 38% three-point shooter? Can Pella be that? KJ Lewis and Jaden Bradley are not really shooters. They're not. So you've already gone through it and you're like, all right, Keyshawn, Jaden, KJ, kind of non-shooters. Ballo's not a guy who can step out. So it really is dependent. You're dependent a lot on Caleb Love, Pella Larson, and Kai Boswell, and they've got to make shots.
If you had to say right now, do you think they have a good shot to go to a Final Four?
I don't know. I mean, it's all matchup. We're so early. We're so early. I got to see all these other teams. It's really hard. I've seen Duke a couple times now. I've seen Kentucky. I've seen Kansas. I've seen Purdue. And honestly, in that game, Arizona was the most impressive team I've seen so far in that one game. But again, it's one game at this point. It's one game.
Yeah, I wanted to get into, a major issue in college basketball has been scheduling. And to me, Arizona's non-conference schedule, one of the best in the country. And they still have four more top 25 matchups than in the next month. Just what do you think about that in general? And just, they're playing Michigan State in a
Yeah.
couple weeks. They're playing Purdue, like you mentioned, you just saw, and FAU and Alabama.
Love it. I mean, absolutely love what Tommy Lloyd's done. He's done what other guys are scared to do. And it's kind of BS, to be honest, because, Tommy's taking it of like, it was kind of like what Lute Olson used to do. Like, play people. You're in Arizona. Play people. Kids want to play people, and it's good for the sport as well. Too many teams are not doing that. Now, I'd love to see even Tommy play. I can't remember what date. What day are they playing in McHale next year? Do you know, Duke?
I don't know what
Probably
date
the
that.
same,
Yeah, I
probably
don't know
like the
what
same
date, but it
Friday.
is in Macau. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be the same Friday or something like that. I want to see some teams play even earlier and
Hmm.
play like that Tuesday, Wednesday. Now next year's voting day, so they won't play on Tuesday. But I just feel like the first few days of the college basketball season were awful this year, absolutely abysmal. So thank God Tommy and Shire played each other, because I think the sport needed it on Friday night. But yeah, the schedule is awesome. Even, I mean, you look at even their mids they're playing. Belmont's really good. Colgate, really good. Like, this is what they should be doing. This is good. I mean, again, you got a couple Morgan State and Southern early on. Other than that, you don't have a whole lot. Wisconsin, like you said, Purdue, Alabama, FAU, Michigan State, Wisconsin. Like, then you throw in Duke, you already played, and Belmont and Colgate. Like, that's a lot for a third-year head coach who honestly hasn't like won it all or gone to a Final Four. Like, I give Tommy a ton of credit for doing this.
Yeah. Speaking of Tommy, where do you rank him right now in just best coaches in the country? Is he top five?
No, hell no. He hasn't done anything to earn that, Ryan. Like, top five.
Also,
Top
also,
five. You're talking like Bill Self, Tom
uh,
Izzo, Mark Few. Like there's dudes that
no,
have
no,
like
but let me
won a
rephrase
ton of
that.
games.
How about guys in their first three
Yeah.
years out of
Oh,
school?
awesome. But there's no way Tommy Lloyd or John Shire, for that matter, are top five in the country with what some of these guys, and obviously there's been a lot of guys who have retired in the last few years. Kay, Jay Wright, Roy Williams, Huggins obviously went out, so there is a little bit of a void in that. But no, I mean, like, Tony Bennett's won a title. Like they're a, I mean, those guys aren't even in the top 10 right now. Tommy Lloyd and John Shire, neither one are in the top 10, and just because they haven't done it long enough.
Yeah, I know we're early in the season, but I heard the other night you said Tyler Kolek's the best point guard in the country. Where do you think Kylan Boswell fits in the best point guards right now in college basketball?
Again, it's early. I would say he's somewhere in that top 10 range right now. Like give it time. Let's see what he does. Let's see how consistent. The one thing I would say with Boswell is you can't measure his impact by numbers. Like his intangibles, his leadership, his toughness, all of that, I think is so important to this team. So, Kolek to me has proven it already for a full year plus, and took his team, not deep in the NCAA tournament, but certainly they had a hell of a year last year, winning the Big East. So I think, Kai Boswell has a chance, and I think he's a top 10 point guard in the country.
As you guys know by now, we've partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook for this college basketball season. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks and predictions throughout the college basketball season. And we are going to have special offers for you, the listeners and the viewers on the Field of 68 each and every week during the season. If you haven't signed up with BetMGM yet, use the bonus code FIELD1500 and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager on BetMGM Sportsbook. Here's what you got to do. Download the BetMGM app. Sign up using the bonus code 1,500. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if that bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FIELD1500 when you sign up. And remember, BetMGM is now available under one wallet in select states. As a New Jersey resident, this is super convenient for me when I have to go cover games in New York or Philly. When crossing state borders, just log into your existing account instead of having to create new accounts in each state that you go to. And most importantly, I got to let you know, we do have some fun stuff coming up for this college basketball season. Bet insurance tokens, college hoops odds boosts, my personal favorite, parlay odds boosts. So download the BetMGM app today.
Yeah, what do you? I want to get your thoughts on, like, what do you make of, Tommy's, short run here the past 2 years? They win Pac-12, tournament championships. They win, 25 plus games each year. A lot of regular season success, but when it gets, to the later and into March Madness, they've come up short. And obviously last year in the first round. What do you kind of make of all that?
Well, I just don't think he had the right players for it. Again, like you need a point guard you can trust. He has that now. You need better defenders. You replace Tabellus with Keyshawn Johnson, and you've got enough offense now. It's not like last year you needed Tabellus's offense, but he didn't really guard. Courtney Ramey was a great player to bring off the bench. Instead, he's starting. So I just think you've got way more options. He's upgraded his roster overall, changed kind of the complexion of the team and how he's going to playing a little fast. They're still playing fast. I guess it's just a different type of style, again, where guys can put it on the bounce and make plays for themselves. And you don't have to rely, completely on just moving the basketball to get a bucket and manufacture. Individual players can manufacture buckets now, where I don't think they could really do that last year.
Yeah, I know we're still early in the season, obviously, but where do you kind of rank in historical terms? Because in the last, 10 years, like, do you think this is one of the better or teams that has a lot of upside to get there, further than the past Arizona teams?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to really think about again, Sean had some really good teams, really good talent. They didn't always put it together. Look at the team with Nico Mannion and Zeke Naji and Josh Green. They were good, but not great. They finished fifth in the Pac-12. He had some really good talent, but I think the hard part too was the last few years going through everything he went through with the investigation. They had DeAndre Ayton. The Trier wasn't great. That he wasn't as good as we thought he'd be, but they had DeAndre Ayton. So they've had talent. I think this team might not have the high-end talent that they've had lately, but I think they've got better, maybe overall talent, like their top six and how they fit together. And I think that's so important. Like, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't fit together, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like, Indiana right now has a lot of talent, but I don't think their pieces fit together. I think Arizona's pieces fit together pretty darn well in this team. You got a really good point guard. I think you've got enough shooting, hopefully. You've got a big. You've got wings that can really guard in different ways. You got guys that can put on the floor. You got willing defenders. I think you have enough leadership. I don't know the answer to that yet, and I'm not sure Arizona does. But again, I think Boswell's that guy.
Yeah, the last thing I want to ask you today, Jeff, is what I just wanted to kind of your overall thoughts on where the program is kind of moving. They're still getting high level talent, but they're not getting, Duke, Kentucky level 5 stars. But, they're getting guys like Boswell, who so hopefully, staying a couple years, and guys like that where Tommy can develop them over time while still mixing in some European guys. What do you think of that philosophy of building this program moving forward?
I like what he's done. What Tommy can do, and not a lot of people can do it. Everybody can mix in transfers and high school kids. Tommy can throw high school kids, transfers, and international kids. And again, he's got the connections that very few have. like you'll see a Mick Cronin get a guy because he hired an assistant coach, Evo, who was there for a little while. But most guys don't have the same level of connections that Tommy does from going over there for years. So I love how this team's put together in that regard, right? Like the international guys are less likely to transfer out. They may go home if they're not playing, but generally they're not going to transfer. So you might get them for a little bit longer. High school kids, you take a shot on some. Like, I don't know how long, KJ will be here. If he doesn't play enough, he could transfer like any high school kid. Take a couple, and then you go with a couple transfers. Obviously a Caleb Love, a Keyshawn Johnson. So I think the ideal situation these days is some sort of mix, because you kind of stay old, try to develop the high school kids if you can. Again, if they're not playing enough, probably going to leave. And so much of this is based on NIL. And I'm not sure if NIL is quite as important to the international. It's different in terms of the NIL than it is for these transfers.
Yeah, well, Jeff, I want to thank you for taking the time out to join me today on the show. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in to today's episode